grabbing it off the stove, serving it to me right off the pot. He left me stewing with thoughts of sitting in a classroom with students of all colors and nationalities, smiling at the words leaving our instructor's mouth. Of my many teachers, I still remember my Irish teacher, Mr. McNeil. He was a tall, unusual man in whose homeroom class I landed during 6th grade year at St. Nicholas of Talentine Elementary School. Tall because he hovered above 6 feet, but unusual because of his insistence on treating classroom time like open mic at the Comic Strip Live. Every day he'd walk in. After lunch, readjusting his glasses, with his belly hanging out, with his legs engaged in a perpetual argument of which one would carry the less weight, the left one supporting the heavy part of his body, while the right leg celebrated another victory in carrying less than a share of the weight, causing the man to dance an unintended jig. Take out your math textbooks, he'd say, explaining that we were about to get ready for 6th grade algebra. Harder than 7th grade, easier than 7th grade algebra, but harder than anything we'd ever put our learning brains to. Before beginning the lesson, he thought it'd be funny to review his list of students that had landed on his favorites list, and the list of those who he thought it'd be okay to pick on. With a flick of his finger on the paper, he'd say, well, if you deserve to be picked on, I don't see why you shouldn't show up on the list. But one day, as I stood waiting for the bus on Cedric Avenue, hidden by the buildings that line Kingsbridge Road, 10 city blocks away from my school, I saw Mr. McNeil as he walked out of the building behind me. He had a tiny dog, which he carried, and he put him on the floor, walking his tiny steps around his owner. And he walked towards me, and he said, hello. The conversation was quick, and I introduced him to my mother, towards whom he warmly smiled. She smiled back at him. It was then I saw who Mr. McNeil really was. I saw him more as an aspiring comedian who opened his mouth back in 1965 to let out a joke, but the joke got stuck in somewhere in the space between the throat and his tongue. This thing of jokes showing up in strange places like introductory algebra class or the middle afternoon dismissal time was more a cruel condition of his symptoms than of the cruelty in his heart. I still remember my street instructors. These instructors would show up in no definite time of the day. I would pass by their classroom as I left my school on my way home. One day he'd appear. As I walked down the street, grabbing my backpack, I look up, and he'd be wearing a white, baggy sweatshirt with baggy, saggy denim pants, adorned with a belt that hung so low that it made me think this is more of an accessory than a utility. He'd call out to his friend, yo, good looking out, as he grabbed some cash from his friend's hand. So that day's lesson, this is how you thank a friend for a favor in the ghetto. The next day, my instructor was a she, and she'd be walking in front of me, smiling at her boyfriend, who'd call her things like, shorty, saying she was his boo. The way she smiled at him and accepted his compliments so easily. Her lessons instructed me that her boyfriend's words were endearing terms he'd use to ensure that he'd keep his girlfriend's love. On Sundays, my street instructor would show up, ordering breakfast from the guy behind the deli counter, asking him to hit him up with a bagel with jelly and cream cheese, please, toasted. So that day's lessons was twofold. This is how you ask for what you want. Lesson number 2, bagel, cream cheese, jelly. But these street instructors taught me that if you live in a neighborhood that's known for being tough, you have to find ways to show the love and appreciation that you had, but hidden. Sooner enough, I started hearing of other people who started making their way to my great city. I began hearing incredible stories about how they came to New York. Well, some scrounging up just enough money to buy a one-way